Usually a lot of students are concerned about the exam for this course, and that is normally due to you not having read a course like this before. You're used to like mathematics and physics and so on, where you have example exams, where you can go through the questions and you can practice to use the formulas and the stuff that you learned throughout the course. But in this course I will not give you any example exams, because that is not the way you learn this subject. Because if I give you an example exam, you will get some questions about the material, and then you will learn the answer to those questions. But that I'm not going to repeat those questions, obviously, so you will have missed the other stuff in the course that might be the things that I'm actually going to ask you to answer questions about. So therefore there's no example exam, but I will give you kind of an idea of what the exam will look like, because that is probably what you're very interested in. And here is one example of a question, and this is kind of a simple question that would probably be in the section 3, where you can pass the exam, but you won't get 4 or 5. So here you can see that you're supposed to explain this graph with relation to the x and the y axis and the S-curve, and some important details have been removed. And then you know that the S-curve is recurring in this course. It could be relating to a number of things. But then you read the B question. With reference to the graph, explain radical and incremental innovation. Then you know that, okay, this is something about radical and incremental innovation. How do I explain that? Then you can answer the A question. You see that there's 2 points for this. That gives you a hint on how much information you should put there. Then you can go to B again and see, with reference to the graph, explain radical and incremental innovation. What happens in each? What is radical and incremental innovation? What happens in the graph? And you explain that, and that is 5 points. So then you see that, okay, here you need to elaborate a bit more. And I'm probably looking for 5 things when I correct this. So that is also good to know. And I'm probably looking for at least 2 important things in the A question here. So that is the basic concept of how I will develop the exam for the pass section, the easy section. Then when we go into the more advanced questions that you need to answer in order to get a 4 or a 5, then it might be that I have like a quote or something that you're supposed to read, and then I might ask you to relate that to some theory that we have learned in the course. It might also be that I have written a scenario of something. This is happening in an R&D department, or now you're an entrepreneur, this is what you're facing, and then I might ask you to propose some way forward. How I'm going to handle this, and how am I going to find solutions to these problems. And I'm not going to ask you to just take things out of on a whim. You need to connect this to theory as well. So you need to study for this exam. Sometimes when you're used to mathematics and physics, and then you take a course like this, you're like, oh, but I can just wing it, I can write something, and I can use my street smart skills, and that will work. But it doesn't work, because I will ask you questions that are related to things that you specifically learned in this course, specifically related to theory. So you need to make sure that you know what we have talked about in the course. And that leads us into my tip for studying for the exam. If I was going to study for the exam, I would go through the lectures and the slides for the lectures, And the workshop slides, if you the workshop's not mandatory, so I know that all of you might not have been there, but it might help you on the exam because you will get more rich information. But I will put up slides after the workshop so you can go through them even though you missed the actual workshop. And go through those and focus on, okay, what did we talk about? What is important here? What models did we use? What theories did we use? What words are important, like incremental, IPR, patent? Do I know what this means? Do I know what we're talking about? Make sure that you know that it's actually just putting knowledge into your head. That's the first step. Make sure that you know this on a kind of basic level. And then I would suggest teaming up with perhaps the people that you made a project with or some other people and start talking about this material. Do we actually understand it? Can we put it into use? And will we be able to use this when we face some kind of situation out there in the real world or when writing the exam? So that is one way to study. So good luck, and feel free to ask me if there's anything that is still unclear when we meet in class.